I'm waiting for that. Got it. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for having me. I am Annette Benbow, and I am with the Arlington Historical Society. And we start every event with a little public service announcement, just to remind you that we're not just a couple of museums. We do a ton of stuff on a monthly basis. We have public events every single second Thursday of the month where we have free lectures on a local history topic. We have both our museums are free. Everything that we have available online is free. There is no paywall, including 70 years of articles about Arlington history on our publications page, which we have every single article from the Arlington Historical Magazine, which has been published since 1957. So no paywall. If you would like to become a member, you'll see directions on our website to do that. Just go under support and click on become a member and learn what that's about. So I just wanted to do a little PSA for us for the sake of a new audience. So with all that, I am going to get down to brass tacks. Okay, so originally you all asked me to talk about the holidays, and that could be really broad. That could be both Christmas and New Year's, but I found so much about just Thanksgiving that I thought that would totally take up my entire time. So here we go. We're going to be focused mostly on Arlington and certainly in Virginia, but first I have got to tell you that the Pilgrims and the Massachusetts folks at Plymouth Rock were not the only ones claiming that they celebrated a Thanksgiving and that they should get dibs on it. There were two Texas claims from decades before the Pilgrims. One of the Texas ones was 1541, where, if you remember from your grade school history, social science classes, Francisco de Coronado was hunting for the 7 cities of gold. Well, he obviously never found them, but when he was in the panhandle of Texas, which was really dry and really hazardous, he found water and he gave thanks to God, and he ate fruit, which was also there. So that was a big deal in 1541, according to Texas. Then decades later, Spanish settlers held another Thanksgiving Mass with Native Americans this time for crossing the Mexican desert into the area just north of the Rio Grande, because that was land that was deeded to them by a Spanish company. Again, nobody expects anybody to be there, but lo and behold, there's tons of Native Americans all over the place. Nevertheless, these Spanish settlers were a little nicer to their Native American folks who were there first, and they invited the Native Americans to eat dinner with them. So these are two Texas claims. So it goes on. There's a Florida claim. A guy by the name of Pedro Menendez was hunting, landed on the Florida coast. He ended up establishing the first European city in North America, known today as St. Augustine. And like everybody else, he gave thanks for landing in Florida, and he also had a celebratory meal. So that's really the criteria. You got to give thanks to God, and you got to eat a meal. And sometimes it was with the Native Americans, and sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes they killed them off, and sometimes they made friends with them. So Virginia has two claims besides the Pilgrims on Plymouth Rock. In 1610, Jamestown colonists who had survived the winter famine held a Thanksgiving service when the English ships arrived with food. They were really hard up. They had chosen a bad place. They didn't have any preparations. And they, about 3/4 of them died in the winter of 1609, 1610. So when English ships arrived, that's when they were thankful. And that's when they were able to A, eat, and B, give thanks to God. So the last claim before 1620 and Plymouth Rock was again in Virginia, where English settlers landed a little bit southwest of Richmond to settle on land granted to them by the British Berkeley Company. Basically, they were contractors who were there to go and settle the area and see if they could make money for the company. Well, they were pretty happy they landed. And like everybody else, they sank to their knees, they gave thanks for a safe passage, and they didn't have a lot to eat, but they ate ship's rations, which probably like dried ham. So no Native Americans joined them in this foray, that's for sure. Okay, so that is the many claims before, and we still don't know why Massachusetts claim is the one that stuck, right? When we learned in school, it was all about the Puritans. There was no mention of these other guys other than, they were off doing their thing, but no other Thanksgiving thing was really acknowledged. And we're still not sure about why that is. Now, I'm not going to go over what happened to Plymouth because I think that is the most common thing that we know, that we can remember. But suffice it to say that they were happy that they had a harvest. It was bountiful. They supposedly did invite Indians, at least the ones that they could find, because apparently, I'm sorry to say, Native Americans had already suffered huge deprivation because of the germs that Europeans had brought to the New World. So there wasn't actually a town, a settlement, a village of Native Americans. They basically were able to raid the empty village and eat what was left behind by Native Americans who had perished or fled. So not really a very happy event that we have today. But I wanted to kind of go through, and I was really shocked to find at least 5 claims of previous Thanksgivings. So the one thing that I found that did stick from New England that makes a little sense today is the fact that Thursdays were representative of the lecture day. So the Puritans and the Pilgrims were very religious. In fact, some people thought they were zealots. And they would have, your service on Sunday, and then midweek you'd have a lecture service. So it was purely sermon, no praying, no, that's what it was. So the lecture day midweek is what historians think Thanksgiving was established, why it was established on a Thursday, and why that tradition has clung to us over time. Okay. So that's pre-colonial America and Virginia. We got 2 claims of, hey, it's us, it's not them. And Puritans, for some reason, historians still don't know really why. We can surmise why the Massachusetts claim won. One of those mysteries of history. Okay, so during the Revolutionary War, we're still able to find reasons to give thanks. The first one was 1777. Remember, the war was declared in 1776. We're only been at war for about 1.5 years. And the British lost at Saratoga. They lost to the Continental Army, not yet known as America. But it was such a defining event in the Revolutionary War. It enabled Ben Franklin to get the French on board with us and ally with us. It really made a huge difference. And it was a big, big pick-me-up during the Revolutionary War, where we were just being crushed by the British left and right in their huge numbers. So that it occurred. There was a Thanksgiving in 1777, and George Washington was happy to order a holiday for his troops who needed it. they'd been through a lot despite the win at Saratoga, and they were assembling at Valley Forge. So this was a day off for soldiers largely, and they got a little bit extra ration in their food, because this was a time where in 1777 the army was not well equipped at all. It had low morale. People were deserting because their 3 months or 6 months were up, and they were done. And yay, they won over the Saratoga, the British at Saratoga. So they were getting fed up with fighting. So this was a great opportunity for Washington to say, yes, we'll take a day off. Soon after, this was when his troops would reach Valley Forge, and they would lose thousands of men to famine, exposure, and disease. So this was sort of the last gasp, and during pre-colonial era, during the colonial era of a Thanksgiving that in this case would have been nationwide. If we were a nation at the time, it would have been seen as, countrywide. So yes, we have it now in the Revolutionary War era. Okay, so in early America, George Washington loved the idea of having a Thanksgiving on a national level, and he ordered one or proclaimed one in 1789 and another in 1795. So it wasn't even a regular thing. He just thought it would be a good thing to do to unite the country, and we have something to be thankful of. And so that's what he did. And John Adams, who he's over here, he followed Washington's tradition. Again, not every year, but in 1798 and 1799. Thomas Jefferson, he was not on board with Thanksgiving, but it was largely because he thought that there should be a separation of church and state, and that was the argument that was hot to trot on during this period in how the country was forming. But he also thought it was unconstitutional for a president to just name the holiday like willy-nilly. So he didn't name any Thanksgivings, and it didn't happen again until 1814, where James Madison at the end of the War of 1812 said, we should give thanks that the British have left or are on their way out. I am proclaiming a day of public fasting and prayer to Almighty God for the safety and welfare of the U.S. He did it again in 1815. Now, you might remember from your local history that James Madison and Dolly, his wife, fled D.C. because the British were burning everything. Remember, they took the Declaration of Independence, and they took some paintings, and they basically preserved the country by fleeing. So he had a lot to be thankful for, because he got to go and come out of hiding and resume government. So it seems that we got a little bit of a trend here. So first it was, we're thankful we made it to wherever we wanted to go, and we're going to eat and give thanks. And then it started to be a trend of war, when the United States could be really thankful that war was either over or coming to an end. So this is sort of the reminder that we've had over the centuries that we should be grateful to God for getting us out of this war, or the war ending, or it happened again and again, and we'll see a little bit more going through history. Okay, so here we are. We made it up to pre-Civil War. This is known as the Antebellum Period. So I was really surprised that even though Virginia and a lot of states celebrated a Thanksgiving, basically a harvest fest where you were really grateful and you celebrated your harvest, your good harvest, many states had that, but it wasn't the same day, it wasn't the same time of year, it wasn't even the same month. But then as the Civil War started to brew, as it got more and more heated, and the country's debate over slavery and states' rights, it really started to take a downward trend in not just the South, but particularly in Virginia, which I found surprising. So Virginia was most against Thanksgiving. They were the most, not virulent, but the most public about it. And largely it was seen across the South as a Yankee abolitionist holiday. So it had already been given a label, right? That this is not us, this is you guys. And Virginia, because of its two previous claims, it really saw itself as the cradle of America and not New England. I mean, it had Jefferson and it had Lee, William Lighthorse Lee, Henry Lee. So lots of Lees before the Lee we all know and have a familiarity with. So Virginia was like, no, it's all about us, not about the North and abolitionist sympathy. In fact, I scoured a lot of sources and found that during this period, there is no record of Arlington House, the plantation up now where the house remains, the Arlington National Cemetery. There's no record of any celebration related to Thanksgiving. Lots of Christmas, but no Thanksgiving. And I was surprised. I was so surprised, I reached out to Charlie Clark, who wrote a book on George Washington Parke Custis, who built the house and lived there till 1857. And I said, Charlie, did you see any reference to celebrating Thanksgiving? I got nothing. And then the National Park Service, they have no reference whatsoever to any letter referring to spending Thanksgiving at Arlington House, nothing. So it was really, I was surprised. I was really surprised. Okay, so there's a great quote. So in 1853, right, we're running up to the heated discussions in Congress, and sentiment was running high. The Virginia governor refused publicly to declare a day of Thanksgiving. He used Jefferson's ideal of separation of church and state, because we shouldn't be mandated to thank anybody for anything. And his successor, the next governor, who was a slave owner, he called Thanksgiving a theatrical national claptrap. That's pretty severe. That's pretty negative. So I was shocked when I discovered all this. Let's see what happened during the Civil War. Okay, so I have a map here on the left, and the blue marks indicate the forts that were built and established around DC to help protect it in case it got attacked by Confederates, right? So in 1861, the Confederate, they were pretty close in until after later in 1861, when they realized after the Battle of Manassas, or the first Battle of Bull Run, they were overrun, right? This was a Confederate victory. The U.S. troops weren't ready. They didn't know what to expect. They thought it was really going to be short. Many people from this area went on a picnic to watch the skirmish that they thought was going to happen, and they were overrun, and everybody fled east towards the Potomac. So in light of that, they started to build all these forts, because the enemy, the Confederates, were really a possibility of attacking closer in. So in actuality, there was skirmishes in Arlington, but fortunately they were just skirmishes. Only a few on either side would lose their life. But nevertheless, here we are at the end of at the end of the harvest, right? And there was a Thanksgiving that was proclaimed. It was basically given a day off, but the 23rd New York Infantry just needed to still reconnoiter. They were up on Uptons Hill, and they were making sure that all these areas surrounding the forts were fine, that were not, there was no, the Confederates weren't using the event as a way to make infiltrations when the US troops were eating or drinking. But happily, the New York infantry did not find any enemy troops. They did instead, according to one letter, capture a large number of feathered rebels. So that to me means they raided everybody's area for any poultry that they could find, because they wanted to use it in at their own Thanksgiving celebrations. So Thanksgiving in and around Arlington, I think it was in 1861 when the Capitol defenses were pretty slim. It was a very difficult, the first year at war. So it's no surprise that Thanksgiving was again declared first by the US, certainly not by the South, but Army chaplains and local clergy led prayers among all the forts and camps. And it was not a very well fed troops, because the Army was still discovering that it needed what it needed to be able to build all these forts and secure the capital.
Annette, we have a couple of questions about the map.
Okay.
One of them is, it says Arlington right in the middle of it.
Yes.
Is that a reference to Arlington House? Because
that is, yes, it is. So that all that area would have been the Arlington Plantation, all the land that the Lees would have owned, or the Custuses would have owned.
Okay,
So, yeah, absolutely.
And along the bottom of the map, it looks like there's a fairly prominent road. Is that Columbia Pike?
I would say yes, it is, because it's right below everything. And Columbia Pike would have been one of the, Columbia Pike had been around for a couple decades before this. I think 1820 was when it was first built. So yeah, that would be it. And then you got, I think you've got Glebe or the Arlington Ridge Road. I'm not sure. It's really hard to assess where each road was, because the routes have changed so significantly between maps we see today and maps back then. What we don't see a lot here are the railroads, which would have helped. So yeah, but yeah, so let's see, Corcoran, Woodbury, here's Roslyn is noticed up here. I'm moving my little mouse there. And then off to the left here is the Ballston area over here. And so the Uptons Hill would have been just north of that, right? North, maybe a little bit off the map. So I wanted to put the map there because I wanted to let you know that the camps were, if you weren't already aware, there were hundreds of thousands of troops in Arlington, in the Arlington region, Alexandria County, as it was then known. And they were using this as basically a training area where they'd go and they'd learn how to shoot and drill and follow orders and, be Army people. So this was one of the areas that saw the most activity before they were shipped off to wherever they went throughout the country to fight in wars, whether it was in Virginia or further west or further south. But they basically got their Army footing, if you will, in our area. Did you say you had another question?
No, that was just the two.
Okay. All right, good one. So this is actually a sketch by a guy by the name of Wad, W-A-U-D. And he was an artist for the New York Illustrated News, and he was assigned to cover the U.S. Army of the Potomac, which was the main body in 1861. So historians believe that this sketch is of Uptons Hill, which is kind of cool. This is where the area where the Lothrop February House mansion used to be, that big green one that sat on I think Wilson Boulevard. So this kind of gives you a sense. You've got a guy holding a turkey here. I think this guy's playing a musical instrument. And basically we got some cooking going on down in the lower left. So this is a pretty nice depiction from this artist about what Thanksgiving would have looked like in Arlington in 1861. Okay, so in 1863, Lincoln issues the proclamation of, yes, let's have a national Thanksgiving. And he made it the last Thursday in November. So this was also one of the first times that businesses also adopted holiday hours in Washington and in Alexandria County, where we live, right? So markets in Alexandria City and in DC Center Market, where a lot of Alexandria County farmers sold their produce, they stayed open late on Wednesday and they were all closed on Thursday. Usually they weren't really open that long on Wednesday, and Thursday was the beginning of the longer hours. So they flipped it. So this is one of the first times where businesses were starting to get in on this. And this was also a time when there's so many more federal workers, right? Not just the military, but federal workers supporting the war effort. And they were also given the day off. So that was another first. And now remember that none of this had anything to do with the South. The South is, its own separate thing. They were not acknowledging, they had seceded. So this was all the countries that stayed in the Union during the Civil War. So by 1863, thousands of soldiers were now in hospitals in Alexandria and in Washington. In Alexandria County, we had convalescent camps, huge camps that were really well organized. And this is the first reporting that we've had that the camps were decorated, the convalescent on the hospitals were decorated, and that substantial special meals were served to patients. So it wasn't just the military that was getting a big meal, but it was also the patients and people around the area who were also celebrating Thanksgiving. In 1863, I think we have the Gettysburg battle, which wasn't an astounding success for the Union, but it was a sign of hopefulness that that might have tipped the scales. I don't think it was the Saratoga that we experienced during the Revolutionary War, but it was a start. So following that, in 1864, we have a hopeful Thanksgiving, in which let's see what was happening. Sherman was on the march in Georgia, and he was having success. Grant was dug in at Petersburg, within Virginia, within sight almost of Richmond, and Lincoln had just won re-election. So when the nation gathered around their various tables in November, on November 24th, it was a hopeful country, hoping that the Union would no longer be a war for very long. And I found that this was an interesting picture to show us, because this is from the Harper's Weekly in 1864, showing a hopeful Thanksgiving. And it's kind of humorous. It's two soldiers who are breaking the wishbone. Before, we had them serving each other, and we had a focus on hospitals and how many people had been injured. But this one is almost humorous in that these two men are celebrating by doing something fun, the wishbone. So 1864, 1865, and we are in Reconstruction now. The war is over, and few Southerners were still willing to celebrate Thanksgiving, including Virginia, outside of Union U.S. Army occupied areas. Apparently, the South began celebrating Thanksgiving only after the U.S. Army left in 1877. Then it started to get the idea that it really should start to look more like the United States, and it sought to attract businesses and look like the United States again. So there was the mass media was also beginning to take hold in the United States, and it gave a lot of coverage to how you cook your meal. So now we have more turkeys, more, how to cook stuffing and all those things, which were not endemic to the South. That's not something that they knew, that they practiced, that they did regularly. So national women's magazines offered readers advice on how to stuff a turkey or bake a pumpkin pie. Again, not something that the South had been practicing much. And then in 1885, several years now since construction was officially over, Congress expanded Christmas and Independence Day to include federal government offices around the country that would close for Thanksgiving. So this made it really official. They passed an act. It wasn't just the president making a proclamation. It wasn't just a general. It was Congress passing an act. So one thing I should remind you is that after the Revolutionary War, and here we were in a new country. So during the colonial era, we celebrated the plethora of British holidays that were largely connected to the royal family, birthdays of various royals, and English history, which goes way back further than ours and has many more opportunities to celebrate. So we were no longer celebrating that after the Revolutionary War. There was nothing except Independence Day, which was ours, a few Thanksgiving harvest fests around the country, kind of all over the place, and Christmas. Those were really the only two celebrations on a national level that were taking place, that were being celebrated somewhere in the United States. So that kind of sets the stage for the fact that presidents weren't doing it anymore, and only since Lincoln and the Civil War had we seen any additional formal holidays. So when Congress passed the act in 1885, it was really cementing it. And one of the things that was popular in Arlington, or what is now Arlington in Alexandria County, were shooting matches. Shooting matches using turkeys and chickens as targets, or other animals that they would have eaten, rabbits, you name it. So there were shooting matches. And this gentleman is hauling his prize, and it seems to still be alive, but I don't know because the head's up. But this was a photo from this era from the Library of Congress. So this guy looks pretty happy with his either his purchase or his reward for a shooting match. Let's see. So here we are, post World War I, 1939, and I like this title, Thanksgiving Becomes Us, for two reasons. It really took hold in the interwar period, and it was still a big argument in the United States. So in 1939, remember Lincoln said that he was going to have it on the last Thursday of every Thanksgiving, of every November. Roosevelt broke with that tradition because the country was still in the throes of the Great Depression. And he was hoping to move it forward 1 week because there were 5 Thursdays that November. And he wanted to elongate the Christmas sale period so that the country would make more money and spend more money, and would help possibly bring the country a little bit out of the Depression. Well, Republicans thought that was the worst thing since sliced bread, and they called it an affront to Lincoln. The people began referring to November 30th as the Republican Thanksgiving on the 5th Thursday, and the 4th Thursday, which Franklin Roosevelt was advocating and declared Thanksgiving, as the Democratic Thanksgiving or Franksgiving. So it was very rancorous. So finally, Congress passes in December 1941 a bill making Thanksgiving always on the 4th Thursday of November. No more moving around, no more this 4th or 5th or whatever. It was always going to be the 4th. And I think we have yet another demonstration of what war will do to the country. Remember, in December 1941, it was the Pearl Harbor on the 7th of 1941, and Congress passed this bill after that. So apparently we were able to come to some sort of unity after we declared war on Japan and later on Germany. So I find that Thanksgiving becomes us, or becomes US, pretty a great demonstration during this entire interwar period, where from 1939, where Franklin Roosevelt tries to do something good, Republicans hate it, and Congress sets the bill after the war had been declared. So that brings us up to things that we can remember, right? So it became a family event. We all have these memories. And the Northern Virginia Sun in Arlington reported everybody's comings and goings. It reminded us that we were such a nice, a small town where, everybody was visiting people and people were going, out of town. And it was just, it was really reminiscent of a small town. My newspaper in my hometown of 2,500 in northern New Hampshire still has all these comings and goings. So to see it in the Northern Virginia Sun made me really understand clearly that this was a small town area, even though we were growing by leaps and bounds. The other thing that the Northern Virginia Sun reported during this time period was religious services everywhere, giving thanks on Thanksgiving Day and welcoming people to come and join them in giving thanks to God. So this really became a family event after World War II. So I saw several different letters and some oral histories that had some different kinds of ways that families celebrated their meal. And I listed them just here, but I'd love to hear from you all. Who ate first? Where did the kids eat? Was there a kids' table? Was everybody together? If you'd like to share some of that, of your early memories, that would be lovely.
The memory I have most is I grew up in a family of 5. So 5 kids, 2 adults, in a 2-bedroom apartment in New York City.
Wow.
What I remember was we fought over the things that were not in large supply. So there was easily turkey and all that foolishness, but we fought over gravy. There was never enough gravy to keep us happy. And, you'd sit there and you'd watch what every kid put on their plate. And like the kid who sort of made believe it was water and poured it all over everything started the biggest fight.
That's hilarious. Thank you, Wendy. That's a great memory. Makes me want to bring more more gravy to my celebration that I'm going to tomorrow.
Well, and we also fought over potato skin. So you'd roast a potato and you'd scoop it out and you'd mash the potatoes. And then the potato skin that were sitting there, presumably bound for the trash bag, was something we also fought over. Yeah,
That is
there's a
amazing.
theme in growing up in my family, fighting over stuff.
Anybody else have any thoughts about their childhood?
Steve has a comment that there was definitely a kids' table at his Thanksgivings. They had a card table. They'd trot out for that. And we've got another one here that I ate at the kids' table, even though I was a budding teen. I got stuck with the little kids. She said her brother and she laughed themselves silly when we called canned cranberry sauce pig sauce.
That's weird. Okay.
And Pax and Nancy have got their hand up. If you guys have a comment you want to make.
Yeah, I was going to say when I was young, we'd go over to my grandparents' house for Thanksgiving, and there were 4 of us kids in my family. I have 3 sisters, and so to make us happy, they give each of us a drumstick for Thanksgiving. We just gnaw on it, and for the longest time, I thought turkeys had 4 legs because I grew up with 4 drumsticks every year when I was little, and I don't remember when I figured out that they only had 2, but because there were always 4, it seemed like they should have 4.
That
So,
is great.
Pax, the equivalent for me was that we got extra necks. So, that's the other thing we fought over, which was necks. And today, even now, I sit there when I cook a turkey and I buy extra necks and cook extra necks. They're never as good as what happened at home. But, I'm thrilled when Wegmans has those giant necks sitting there that I can buy.
Wow. Huh.
And we've got another comment here. The picture of the soldiers with the wishbone reminded her of her childhood when they used to fight over who got to break the wishbone. And I can definitely remember that at my house too. It was always an argument over who got to break the wishbone.
That's great.
And then the thing that was the biggest fight, and I was not involved in this one because I didn't care, was who got the first slice of the cranberry crap. Excuse me, whatever you called it, because it wasn't
Here on the
sauce.
table, right?
The cranberry that came out of the can.
Yeah.
And
here it
somehow
is.
my 2 older brother and sister thought that first slice that had the ridge of the can top was like better than anything else.
That is-
I don't even understand that today, why that would matter.
That's amazing. Well, that's great. So we have a lot in common now. Okay, so one of the things that the Arlington is known for is the old Oaken Bucket competition between Washington and now Liberty High School and George Washington High School in Alexandria. So it started in 1926, but the first game on Thanksgiving itself was 10 years later. And there was a great oral history from a guy by the name of Bill Junette, who was an Arlington County police officer. And he said that when the police motorcycle squad escorted the team out of Arlington into Alexandria, that it was followed by a couple hundred cars, and everybody in the Arlington police force was sworn in as an Alexandria police officer, and they help police the game, right, and keep order or whatever. And then on the next year, when the next game was held in Arlington, then the Alexandria motorcycle police squad escorted the team into our county, and again followed by a couple hundred cars. And the Alexandria police squad was then sworn in as Arlington police to help police the game. So I thought that was an interesting little memory from the police officer about these games. So this is the actual program from 1963. This is in the museum artifacts that the Arlington Historical Society has. It was donated to us, and we have several of these. But it's reminiscent of what the newspaper articles would have, which would be players kicking the ball and looking very excited. So this is something that still goes on today. I think they had an interruption in the years during the pandemic, but I believe it is going to be played again tomorrow. Anybody remember going to these games?
Well, don't see any responses.
Okay, all right, no big, we're all busy eating, we're not busy playing football. Well, it's not the only place that gets to play football on Thanksgiving Day. Highview Park has had a Thanksgiving tradition that's 70 years old, where older players compete with younger players, and it's purely for accolades and applause. There's no real, reward. There's no blue ribbon. It's just a lot of fun. During that, they also, seek donations for groceries for families in need, and they raise scholarship money for a college student with ties to Halls Hill or Highview Park. So this is an indication of where else Arlington goes. So here's another opportunity where Arlington gives on Thanksgiving. It's not just about sports, it's about giving. And we have lots of examples throughout the county, lots of fundraisers for food. And this fun run began 17 years ago with just 300 runners. But look, you can see the crowd behind. I mean, there's thousands of people out running on Thanksgiving Day. It's supposed to be a fun run. So you can walk, you can run, you can jog, you can loiter, and you can help raise money. So again, it provides money for Arlington residents in need. So this is where we've gone as a community. We've gone, we eat a lot, we have fun, and we raise money for people. And it's still going on. The Knights of Columbus here, they've been providing meals to Arlingtonians who need it the most for 29 years. And their last in 2019, they prepared 3,000 meals. So they are ready to go again tomorrow. And then more recently, we've had First Thanksgiving for refugees. And these are refugees from all over the world, particularly Afghanistan and Ukraine this year. There's always someone who needs to be reminded that there's still some good in the world, even if they're suffering from displacement.
Annette, just so you know, we're about 7 minutes to 11. So,
And I am done.
all right, perfect. So we got a comment here from Pat about the turkey trot, that she always goes and cheers on the trotters every year.
That's great.
And the man who organizes the turkey trot was, and I don't know his name offhand, I'm sorry, was just honored by the Arlington Community Foundation for their Spirit of Community Award.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, 400 people celebrated him last Friday at an event at the Westin Hotel.
That's great, and justly so.
Mhm.
So that's a look at how Arlington has celebrated Thanksgiving down through the centuries.
So I'll put in a plug for the PBS special on the Pilgrims, because while I don't remember it, they do talk a lot about how the Pilgrims get credit for being the first, even though Jamestown was there, 10 or 20 years earlier, and, had more people and more people who died. But either the written record that Bradford had done or other things prompted them to get credit for the founding of America.
So that's all I had. If there's any other questions.
Okay, well, there's a comment here from Pax and Nancy that they live in Glen Carlin and love the Ball Sellers house.
Thank you very much. We do too.
And a question here, were you going to say something about Parkington?
I didn't have anything. I thought I was doing pretty good with, within 7 minutes. So I always think of Parkington as being more Christmassy because it would have Christmas messages up on it, but I don't have any pictures of it to show you.
Yep.
All right, well, Annette, thank you so much. This was the perfect introduction to the Thanksgiving holiday and the season of giving. We really, really appreciate your sharing this. Every time we touch the Arlington Historical Society, we all come away just so much more informed
Oh, you're very
about our
kind.
community.
Great. Happy to hear that. So visit our site, learn more, and become a member.
Yes,
That would really be helpful.
great.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank you
Annette.
so much. And happy Thanksgiving to you all.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.